Asante sana Mheshimiwa Rais, na mimi pia nataka nikuhakikishie vile tumesema jana ya kwamba Warundi wajisikie wakiwa nyumbani hapa kwetu Kenya, na tuendelee kutenda mema ya kuinua hali ya maisha ya wananchi wa nchi zetu mbili na pia wananchi wa Afrika Mashariki kwa jumla. Lakini pia Mheshimiwa Rais, ningependa kukushukuru kwa kazi njema ambayo wewe na serikali yako mnaendelea kufanya ya kuhakikisha ya kwamba tumerudisha amani kwa nchi ya Burundi na wananchi wa Burundi wameanza tena kuona maendeleo. Na nataka nikuhakikishie leo ya kwamba sisi na wenzetu wa Afrika Mashariki tutaungana pamoja nawe tuhakikishe ya kwamba hii economic sanctions ambayo imewekwa kwa nchi yako imeondolewa, na ndio wananchi wa Burundi waweze kupata maendeleo ambayo wanastahili. So fellow Kenyans, today we celebrate the cultural diversity of Kenya, and we further strengthen our nationhood. For in the year 2015, I issued an executive order on the rotational hosting of our National Day celebrations in all our counties. Today, Kisumu City joins the growing list of counties that have played host to a National Day celebration. That is the counties of Nakuru, Nyeri, Machakos, Meru, Kakamega, Narok, Mombasa, and Kisii. This tradition allows for a focus on the positive contributions being made under devolution, while also enabling the hosting county to showcase itself on the national stage. Being in Kisumu today is significant and uplifting as we forge lasting bonds between the people of Kenya. This congregation here today is also a celebration of the handshake, a new political normal that not only embraces competition, but also encourages reconciliation and the healing of wounds, regardless of how fierce the competition was. The choice of Kisumu to host Madaraka Day this year is also intertwined with our national heritage, for there cannot be a better place to celebrate our liberation struggle and ponder the future of self-rule than here in Kisumu City. Kisumu is not only the historical hub of the East African Cooperation, it was also the intellectual incubator of some of the leading ideas behind our liberation movement. The national motto of Harambee, even though an import from India, was, for instance, introduced as a political rallying call here in Kisumu during the 1950s. After independence, our founding fathers popularized it as the national mantra of pulling together. Similarly, and led by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Kisumu was the epicenter of the push to release Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and the Kapenguria Six from their illegal detention by the British colonizers. Furthermore, during the detention of the liberation heroes at Kapenguria, union leaders from this region joined other Kenyans and quickly stepped into the gap to ensure that the liberation momentum was not lost. It was pre-independence leaders from this region who taught us that wacha aende mambo yake bwana. Haya, tuendelee sasa. It was pre-independence leaders from this region who taught us that attaining self-rule was not a one-man race. Rather, it was a relay in which one set of runners fell out, another set was ready to continue the race. With such a well-appointed history of the struggle and the history of reconciliation that we are marking today, there cannot be a better place to commemorate Madaraka Day than here in Kisumu. Fellow Kenyans, today we celebrate close to 6 decades of self-rule. We celebrate the return of our liberties, the restoration of our dignity, and the democratic resilience that we have brought over the last 58 years. Today we also celebrate the war heroes who gave their all, including their lives, for us to be free. They sacrificed their freedom and their lives, knowing fully well that sometimes those who plant the seeds of freedom may never enjoy the fruits that follow. For their martyrdom, we honor our fallen heroes this Madaraka Day, and we do it fully conscious that a nation that does not honor its heroes will receive no honor amongst nations, to quote one thinker. As we celebrate self-rule today, we must also honor our founding fathers who dared to imagine Kenya, the bold and selfless architects of this great republic. And from this region of Nyanza, we honor, among others, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Tom Joseph Mboya, who was the architect of our economic blueprint at independence, and Achieng' Oneko, amongst others, who was one of the Kapenguria Six. Today we honor all the founding fathers of this nation, and we must also recall their principles of nationhood, and I will today just mention a few of these. One, they taught us that a progressive nation is one that is in continuous conversation with itself. This is because nationhood is a negotiated process that needs constant alignments and adjustments in the pursuit of perfection. The architects of Madaraka, however, warned us, a fact that I will not tire to remind you, that in making such adjustments and alignments, we must always avoid the paralysis of constitutional rigidity. Two, they taught us that self-rule is not an end in itself. It is a means to a greater end. Indeed, to quote T.J. Mboya, he said, and I quote, "Only through freedom and human rights could a people cooperate fully with their government," end of quote. But fellow Kenyans, freedom and human rights to be realized, the paradox of choices must be resolved. Three, they reveal the paradox when they emphasize that self-rule is the granting of opportunities, but accompanied by the burden of choice. Every opportunity in the exercise of freedoms and self-rule must be tempered by the consequence of choice. Every right granted must have a corresponding responsibility, and those who enjoy opportunities but neglect the burden of choice cannot be said to be truly free. This paradox of choices and freedoms applies to both individuals as well as institutions. Fellow Kenyans, based on some of these teachings, I believe we have built one of the most robust democracies in Africa. The fields of individual freedoms have expanded, and citizen participation has become emboldened. Our independent institutions have also occupied their rightful positions, and all of this because of the 2010 Constitution. And as I have said in the past, ours is probably one of the most progressive constitutions in the continent and indeed the world. However, since the 2010 Constitution expanded our individual fields of freedom, it also expanded the burden of the choices we make. Even our founding fathers urged the liberated patriots to shift from the status of being subjects to that of citizens when their fields of freedom were expanded. They made it clear that a citizen is someone who understands the responsibility that comes with freedom, while a subject will squander opportunities granted by self-rule and refuse to shoulder the burden of choice. Similarly, I believe the framers of the 2010 Constitution did not envision a situation where expanded fields of rights resulted in diminished responsibility by citizens and institutions. They saw a balance between freedoms and the consequences of choice. But this balance is probably most challenged by the growth of our independent institutions. Their growth has stretched our democratic boundaries to the limit, but it has not cracked them. It has bent the will of the people, but it has not broken it. In fact, any other African country experiencing the political turns and twists that we have experienced in the search of greater perfection in our nationhood, I believe would have burst asunder, and we have seen many such examples across our land and continent. From the nullification of a presidential election in 2017 to an attempt to stop the will of the people as expressed through the BBI, the judiciary has indeed tested our constitutional limits. While I stand by the rule of law, and I will always obey the decisions of the courts, I am also compelled by my position to heed the sovereign and supreme voice of the people of Kenya. And that is why our national conversation today must focus on the consequences of choice. If citizens are required to exercise their will and shoulder the burden of their choices, should the independent institutions therefore not do likewise? In the field of independence, we have expanded the independence in the judiciary. But how should they expand their field of their responsibility and respond to the summons of nationhood? Shouldn't their decisions also be accompanied by the burden of choice? These are the questions of our national conversation, and we should objectively ponder them. And here I must be frank and ask what I believe to be legitimate questions. It is a fact that we were losing close to 1 billion shillings every working hour for the 123 days we held the 2017 election. The question the national conversation should therefore ask is, who carried the burden of this choice? Was it the judiciary or the people. The truth of the matter is that it was the people who carried the burden of the choice. Development programs meant to make a difference in the lives of people had to be shelved. The second is that as a consequence of 2017, we initiated, together with millions of Kenyans, the BBI process that was meant to build bridges and create inclusive politics and end ethnic majoritarianism. If the court had subjected its decision to stop BBI to a cost-benefit analysis, in other words, if it had considered the burden of choice, then there are questions the judiciary would have asked. If we indeed were at a constitutional moment, is a decision against BBI a decision in support of the status quo? If BBI were to be stopped, who carries the burden of choice? On whose shoulders will ethnic majoritarianism rest? And who will carry the burden of losing 30% of our national budget every 5 years due to the toxic politics that BBI sought to resolve? The judiciary would have asked itself another question. Can Kenya truly be a democracy if the people are denied the opportunity to express their sovereign and supreme choice at the ballot box on the basis of elevating technicalities over the overriding objectives of the law? Our Constitution, fellow Kenyans, is not a yoke around our necks, but rather it should be a mighty sword that can break the chains that limit all of us as citizens. The moral foundations of justice demands that the judiciary bears the burden of choice and the consequences therefore, especially when the burden of judicial choices is proposed to be carried out by the people. Fellow Kenyans, as I turn to the national question of our times, as is the national tradition every Madaraka Day, I wish to remind us of an instruction left behind by the founding father of our nation, Uhuru Kenyatta. He said, and I quote, "Our children, born and unborn, may learn about the heroes of the past, but our present task is to make ourselves architects of the future." End of quote. This, fellow Kenyans, was a call to action. It was a call to predict the future by creating it. And against this backdrop, the national question of the moment must be poised. If indeed freedom is nothing but an opportunity to become better, how have we enriched what the founding fathers placed in our custody? Have we made it better than we found it? And has Kenya occupied its rightful place in the society of nations as a result of our improvements? I believe that that is the national question of the day. And in response to this question, I will use the 4 frames of our liberation struggle that have informed my administration. The first is economic. This frame is informed by the notion that political freedom in the absence of economic freedom is nothing but an illusion. Given that the founding fathers stood for economic inclusion and the administrations before mine was about economic recovery, my administration has embraced the maxim of economic acceleration. Economic acceleration in my administration is about increasing the speed of achieving our national goals. And we have increased the speed at national, county, as well as individual levels. At the national level, the colonizers left us with a gross domestic product, which is a measure of our national cake, of close to Kenya shillings 6.4 billion in 1963, using the exchange rate of the time. After 74 years of colonial occupation, that is what Kenya was worth every year. The combined administrations of Mzee Kenyatta, Mzee Moi, and Mzee Kibaki increased this national cake to Kenya shillings 4.5 trillion, and they did this in a span of 50 years. In the last 8 years, my administration has doubled what the colonizers and the first 3 administrations did in 128 years. Our national cake, our annual worth as a country every year, now stands at Kenya shillings 10.3 trillion. And even if you factor in inflation, our economic acceleration program has multiplied what the founding fathers left in our custody. At the county level, we have allocated Kenya shillings 2.3 trillion to our counties. This is equivalent to 16% of our GDP. What this means is that we have sent to the counties the equivalent of what our national cake was between 1885, when the colonizers came to Kenya, and when President Moi retired in 2002. That is the money that has gone mashinani. What they've done with it, hiyo ni yao. The BBI dream is to send even more resources to the counties in order to catalyze their accelerated development. And that is why we have proposed under the BBI to send 35% of our national revenue to counties. Fellow Kenyans, at the individual level, our economic acceleration initiative has focused on the allocation of title deeds. And I'm proud to say that we have accelerated land adjudication in a way that is unprecedented. The previous administrations combined issued 6 million title deeds to Kenyans in 5 years. In the last 7 years, my administration has issued 5.1 million title deeds. On a pro rata basis, ladies and gentlemen, this is 7 times what previous administrations had done combined. I am happy that close to 20% of those title deeds we have issued are in the Nyanza region. In fact, most of them right here in Kisumu County. The title deed is what our founding fathers fought for when they made land ownership a central plank of our independence struggle. And by accelerating land adjudication and settlement, my intention is to ensure that we give security of tenure to as many Kenyans as possible. The next frame is what I call the big push investments. Our founding fathers laid the foundation for the future they dream of. Then they dared us to build that future by doing big things. But on this, they also cautioned us that to do big things, you cannot be distracted by small things. The big push investments are about laying the ground for our economic takeoff. Many Kenyans have asked why my administration is investing in big infrastructure projects. Why roads, rail, why ports? Indeed, when Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer, and his cohorts dreamt of the road from Cape Town to Cairo, their vision was not the road. The road was not their dream. The dream was what the road would do for them. In the same vein, our brick and mortar investments of roads, rails, and ports are not the dream. The dream is what the big push investments will do for Kenya and how they will transform our standing in the community of nations and form the basis of national prosperity and the creation of decent and steady jobs for our people. Take, for instance, the Lamu Port, which I commissioned 2 weeks ago. It is the first port to be built in Kenya since the port of Mombasa in 1896. For 115 years, no government has built a deep sea port on the East African coast of the Indian Ocean. Kenya is the first country to do so. Similarly, the history of this port dates back to 1972, when the idea was first hatched. It took 49 years for us to conceptualize and mull over this port, but we, in a period of 8 years, have made it a reality. Once this port is operational, Kenya will have claimed its stake in the Indian Ocean real estate. The port of Lamu will be able to handle ships the size of those that transit through the Suez Canal. And this capacity will not only increase our transshipment business, but will also impact over 130 million residents of the East African region. Another big push investment that we have been engaged in is the revival of what I call dead capital. We have done this because the instructions of our founding fathers was to take care of what they had built. And in this regard, we have revived 566 kilometers of dead meter gauge railway. The revived 200-kilometer Nairobi-Nyanyuki railway will be a game changer. Every trip, the train will transport 1,600 passengers, which is equivalent to a convoy of 120 matatus. And the cost per passenger will be Kenya shillings 200 compared to current Kenya shillings 500 by matatu. Although it takes a little longer by train, the passenger will make a 60% saving using the revived rail system and have more money left in his pocket, while at the same time traveling at greater comfort and safety. Further, by moving our tea and coffee through this line at greatly reduced costs, the result is extra shillings in the pockets of our hard-working farmers. But I believe the most uplifting story of the revival of dead capital is one big push investment, and that is the port of Kisumu and the reconditioning of MV Uhuru vessel. I will not talk about the jobs this has created or will create and the buzz that it has evoked. These are obvious, but let me just focus on the economics of this decision. Today, to transport fuel by road from Kisumu to Uganda takes 72 hours because of the long queues at the Malaba border. But to transport fuel from the port of Kisumu to Port Bell in Uganda by ship takes only 12 hours. This means that by the time a tanker makes one trip to Uganda, MV Uhuru will have made 6 trips. Then there is the question of volume. One tanker carries 20,000 liters of fuel, but one wagon aboard our vessel in Kisumu carries 60,000 liters, which is 3 times the size of a tanker, which means that every time the ship sets sail, it carries 1,100,000 liters of fuel. If the ship accommodates 22 wagons, each voyage it makes to Port Bell is the equivalent of a convoy of 66 tankers headed to Uganda. What is more is that it costs $35 to transport 1,000 liters of fuel by road per kilometer. Over the lake, it costs $16 to transport the same through the port of Kisumu. That means for every $2 spent transporting fuel to Uganda by road, you spend only $1 through the port. Furthermore, the fuel lost, don't ask me how, but the fuel lost Kila mtu anajua nini inatendeka huko. The fuel loss by road transport was estimated to be worth Kenya shillings 6 billion every year. Today, by transporting through rail and lake, this has been reduced to zero, while fuel adulteration is a thing of the past. For those asking why we have made the big push investment in the port of Kisumu, that is your answer. It takes 1/6 of the time to transport goods by ship compared to by road, and this is good for traders, but also for investors, making our region that much more competitive globally. To date, that one single vessel has transported close to 50 million liters of fuel to Uganda. If in one trip you can carry 3 times the volume compared to tankers, I believe that that is good commerce. If it costs you half the price to use the port of Kisumu, that, my friends, is good economics. Indeed, all our big push investments have been conceived to catalyze the economy and to provide the most rational choices for all actors. So, fellow Kenyans, I want to go to a third frame that I would like us to ponder over this Madaraka Day, and that is the restoration of dignity. And our founding fathers defined dignity as freedom from want. From the onset, liberation from the poverty of dignity was a central motive of our independence struggle. Indeed, our founding fathers taught us that self-rule will not be fully attained until self-worth is restored. And the national question we must ask is whether we are on track to liberating our people from the poverty of dignity, and to what extent have we liberated them from want. Article 23 and Article 43 of our Constitution makes the restoration of dignity a continuous process rather than a one-off activity. We must ask this Madaraka Day is how well have we rendered this aspect of our freedom? Some may ask what poverty of dignity is. Let me explain. Before we started the big push investments in Nairobi, there was only one clinic with 15 beds serving 500,000 residents of the Mukuru informal settlement. Meaning that when a mother delivered a baby in Mukuru, she had less than 1 hour of postnatal care before being asked to leave to make way for the next patient. This is the poverty of dignity. We have fixed this indignity by building 25 hospitals in our informal settlements of Nairobi to ensure that our mothers do not need to go through that kind of indignity again. Let me give another example. When a patient suffering from kidney disease had to travel for 70 kilometers from Siaya to Kisumu 3 times a week for dialysis, that was a tragic indignity. But further, the tragedy of this indignity was made worse because the patient needed 10 dialysis sessions a month, and if one session cost between Kenya shillings 9,000 and Kenya shillings 16,000, it meant that the patient had to spend between 90 and 160,000 shillings per month. How many farmers from Siaya can afford 160,000 every month for dialysis? Such patients had to sell their ancestral inheritance in order to get treatment. The net effect of this was that their illness ended up diminishing their families and indignifying them for generations to come. Today, I am happy to note that a patient from Siaya no longer has to travel 70 kilometers to Kisumu for treatment. There are dialysis machines in Siaya at the sub-county level. Similarly, He does not have to pay $160,000 a month for dialysis or sell his ancestral land. All he needs to do is to spend 500 shillings every month on an NHIF card, and this card gives him free dialysis every month. If dignity is freedom from want, then we have restored it using our health interventions, as I have just stated. I say this because between 1963 and 1978, as a country, we had only one renal unit and one dialysis machine. President Moi added one more, and President Kibaki added 4 more renal units. By the time my administration took over, we only had 6 renal units for the entire country. Today, and in only 6 years, we have 54 renal units with 360 state-of-the-art dialysis machines distributed among all 47 counties. Coupled with the NHIF card, this upgraded health infrastructure has restored the dignity to many families previously condemned to disinherit their children because of disease. The dignity of families is supported by sustainable livelihoods, and it is for this reason that my administration's agenda continues to focus on creating an enabling environment that offers every Kenyan an opportunity to participate in the economy. Over the years, for example, micro, small, and medium business enterprises have turned to be breeding ground for indigenous industries. Because of this remarkable expansion, their contribution to national development continues to grow from strength to strength, and they are today the greatest engines of employment creation in our nation. To enable this region make its contribution to our national development, I look forward in the coming months to once again visiting Kisumu to commission the development of the 1,000-acre Kisumu Special Economic Zone. This singular initiative will provide immense opportunities for value addition of agricultural products for the entirety of the Western region and enhance the blue economy activities of the Lake Victoria Basin. The dignity that we seek to restore through livelihoods, I believe, will give every Kenyan an opportunity to participate in economic development. For instance, many of our Juakali artisans and craftsmen have had to endure the inequity in the tendering of contracts because of their lack of ability to get certification, hereby denying them the opportunity to get access to work. I am announcing, therefore, today a new initiative by my administration to provide a framework for the recognition of their skills through the awards of certificates based on competence in order to enable our Juakali sector participate in various economic opportunities that have currently been denied to them. In this regard, I today direct the Ministry of Education through the Kenya National Qualifications Authority to, within 1 month of this date, issue a policy framework for the comprehensive recognition of prior learning. This policy intervention will expand the opportunities for artisans and craftsmen in our Juakali sector to participate more meaningfully in our economy. Fellow Kenyans, I will now end briefly with the 4th frame of our national question this day. For us to secure what we have achieved in 58 years, we must not make politics the heat and the light of our national existence. Instead, we must endeavor to pursue political stabilization by any means necessary. I say so because stability and peace is the lifeblood of our republic. What we have built for 58 years can be destroyed in one day of political instability. But we cannot engage in political stabilization if we continue to live in political denial. For instance, and I will say it again, everyone knows that the BBI is good. It's good for our country. It is even good for those people who are unhappy with it. But too many Kenyans have embraced fear of change over the need to continuously strive for a more fair, just, peaceful, cohesive, and democratic Kenya. They oppose the bill sometimes not because of its substance, which even its harshest critics concede is good, but because, unlike our founding fathers, they cannot dare to imagine a better Kenya for all. Fellow Kenyans, as I said of the judiciary, their decisions must consider the letter of the law, but fundamentally, the spirit of the law must also guide them. I say so with all humility because the spirit of the law is the light that will illuminate the burden of the choices that they make. For every decision they make, the spirit of the law will lead them to the consequences of their choices. The judiciary should be guided by the spirit of the law, and political stabilization will be easily achieved. And as for all of us, the political elite of this country, if we are going to continue to remain short-termist and self-serving, the consequence of our choices will become a permanent burden on our people. Let it be clear to all Kenyans, short-termism is not the path to political stabilization. Our founding fathers encouraged liberated patriots to upgrade their status from being subjects to that of being citizens by embracing freedom with responsibility. And I want to make a similar invitation to our political class this Madaraka Day. I want to invite them to upgrade their status from being politicians to being leaders. Politicians are too often obsessed with personal gain, but it is our national pain that should disturb them. Fellow Kenyans, I have just illuminated just a fraction of what my administration has done, for that is not, I believe, important. That is not what is important. What is important is the recognition of what those who went before us did. We have only built on their foundation with a full recognition that we are still a long way to achieving all the hopes and aspirations of our people. But like our forefathers, we live in the hope that future administrations will not seek to live in acrimony and division, will not seek to destroy, but to build on our achievements and reach even greater heights so that we can truly live the vision of Kenya as articulated by our forefathers, that the task before us is not today, but how can we become architects of that future. And that is why today I want in particular to thank the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga for embracing national pain over his personal gain when we did the handshake. What is more, and many do not know that, is that he did this without asking or demanding anything from me. And I want to say today that whatever the future holds, I look forward to working with him and all Kenyan leaders and Kenyans to build a better, brighter, more united and prosperous Kenya, East Africa, and Africa. Nimesema asante Jacomo, na kwa viongozi wenzako wengine wote. Asanteni. Fellow Kenyans, in concluding my remarks, let me say today again, as Governor Anyang' Nyong'o said, that Kisumu City will, from the 26th to the 30th of April next year, play host to the largest Afro-Cities Summit ever hosted on the African continent. That event will be a gathering that will feature ministers, mayors, leaders of local authorities, representatives of civil society, the private sector, academia, national, regional, and international financial institutions, as well as development partners and other stakeholders. My extension, Governor, my administration, Governor, will extend to the county government of Kisumu every support in order for you to be able to showcase Kenya and Kisumu to Africa and the rest of the world. In the same breath, allow me to say how proud I am today to be addressing you from this brand new Jomo Kenyatta International Stadium in Kisumu, and I wish to assure you that all the remaining works will be completed over the next coming weeks. Hongera Waziri Amina Mohamed and your team, pongezi sana na muendelee hivyo hivyo. So ladies and gentlemen, it is now my very distinguished pleasure and honor to wish every Kenyan, wherever you may be, a happy Madaraka Day, and to once again encourage you to stay safe. May God bless you all. May God bless Kenya. Mungu aibariki Afrika Mashariki, na Mungu aibariki kontinenti letu la Afrika. Asanteni sana, asanteni sana. Nimewashukuru sana 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 sana. Thank you.
Basi kwa heshima naomba tusimame kwa wimbo wa taifa. Kwa heshima naomba sote tusimame tafadhali.